The prince of the realm choked on his wine the moment I realized I was in love with him. I want to be clear, because if I am going to die tomorrow for crimes I did not commit, I would at least like the record to show that I am not the sort of man who falls in love during his own treason trial, that I had not meant to realize it. I had not been working up to it. I had not been carefully arranging my feelings in a row, the way the Duke, whose body I was wearing, might have arranged them, locked behind the cold, dignified face that all his portraits insisted on. It had just happened, mid-thought, quietly, like a window opening. He had looked tired. That was all. That was the entire beginning of it. The Prince of the Realm, Jan Aerith, Regent of the Crown of Resonance, the lonely heir, the man I had personally hated on behalf of fictional characters for 16 chapters of a novel I was now apparently in, had been sitting on his throne for the better part of an hour, listening to Lord Marcellus describe in lurid detail the many ways in which I was supposed to die, and he had looked tired. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes. He had not finished the bowl of soup the steward brought him at the morning recess. His shoulders were holding themselves a careful half-inch higher than they wanted to. And I had thought, without thinking, oh, he didn't sleep. And then, someone should make sure he eats. Someone should bring him better soup. Someone should sit beside him at the end of the day and just be quiet with him. He has been so quiet for so long, by himself. Someone should be quiet with him. And then, before I could stop it, before any of the careful walls of the Duke's borrowed face had any idea what was happening behind them, oh no. I want it to be me. I want it to be me. I want to be the person who is quiet with him. I want, I love him. I love him. I love him. I'm in love with him. When did that even, The Prince of the Realm choked on his wine. It was not a small choke. It was a full imperial blue robes now stained red, goblet clattering down the marble steps of the dais, crown of resonance slipping 3 inches to the left kind of choke. The court gasped. Lord Marcellus, mid-syllable in his denunciation of my many treasons, stopped with his mouth still open. 23 nobles in heavy embroidered robes turned, as one, to stare at their regent prince. I, standing in chains at the foot of the dais, kept my face perfectly cold. Inside, I had just been ambushed by my own heart. Oh God, he heard that. Oh God, he heard all of that. That is why he is currently coughing his lungs up onto his own throne. Oh God, I have known him for 2 days. You can't fall in love with someone in 2 days. You can't. That is not how time works. The prince pressed the back of one gloved hand to his mouth. He did not look at me. He did not need to look at me. A faint, terrible color had risen high in his cheeks, and the crown of resonance on his slightly crooked brow was pulsing, slowly, deliberately, like a very polite heartbeat, exactly in time with the panic in my chest. Your Highness? Lord Marcellus had recovered enough to be appalled. Perhaps the wine? The wine, said the Prince of the Realm, with the strangled dignity of a man who would rather walk into the sea than continue this conversation, is fine. Continue, Lord Marcellus. The prisoner stands accused of... Continue, Lord Marcellus. Marcellus continued. I did not move. I did not blink. The chains on my wrists were heavy, and the marble under my boots was cold, and the resting villain face I had inherited along with this borrowed body was by all accounts doing its job, because every noble in the chamber was looking at me as though I personally murdered their dogs. Inside, I was filing for emotional bankruptcy. Take it back. Take it back. I didn't mean it. I meant it. I clearly meant it. I would not be having this much of a crisis about it if I did not mean it, but take it back. Take it back. Take it back. The prince lifted his eyes, just once, just briefly, from the wine-stained front of his robe. He looked at me. He looked at me like a man who had been struck by lightning and decided, on balance, to be polite about it. And in that 1 second of held gaze, across a treason trial, across a kingdom, across the entire impossible architecture of how I had ended up in this body, in this century, in this catastrophic disaster of a life, I realized 2 things. 1. Prince Jan Arif could hear every word that ran through my head. 2. He had been hearing them for 2 days. Let me back all the way up. Before the wine, before the chains, before the resting villain face and the crown that listened and the word I was apparently no longer allowed to think in front of company. Before any of this was a problem I was going to have to solve, sitting alone in a borrowed body in someone else's worst week. Let me start at the real beginning, the one that smelled like old parchment. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Old parchment, burning sandalwood, the faint copper tang of something that might have been blood or might have been the polish they used on the marble floors. It clung to the back of my throat, thick and ceremonial, and for one delirious second I thought I was in a museum. A very loud museum where someone was screaming. "And I, Lord Marcellus, demand the immediate execution of this traitor." My eyes snapped open. The world that greeted me was not my apartment, not my desk, not the half-eaten bowl of instant noodles I had been hunched over while marathoning my favorite novel for the 4th time in that month. The world that greeted me was a vaulted ceiling painted with gold-leafed dragons, a forest of pillars taller than any building I'd ever stood inside, and a sea of nobles in heavy embroidered robes who were all, every single one of them, staring at me like I personally set their grandmothers on fire. Where am I? A weight pressed against my temples. Memories, not mine, someone else's life folding itself into the cracks of my own like wet paper. A childhood spent in a snow-covered northern keep, a father with a voice like an avalanche, a name, Duke Lionel Vane of the Frostmoor. Oh no. I knew this name. I knew this throne room. I knew the cold-eyed man in red and gold court robes who was pacing the dais like a hunting hound, jabbing his finger at me and demanding my head. Lord Marcellus, the wicked advisor. I had hated him for 16 chapters of a novel I had read on my phone in bed, and now he was 3 meters away from me, real and screaming at the top of his lungs that I should be quartered before nightfall. No, wait, this is the trial of Duke Lionel, the villain, the one who gets executed in chapter 12, the one who never got to defend himself because he was too proud to speak. My mouth was dry. My hands, gloved in black leather, were shaking under the weight of chains I had not noticed were locked around my wrists. The body I now wore was tall, too tall. The world looked wrong from this height, and broad through the shoulders and stiff with a tension that I could feel in muscles I did not know how to control. I tried to swallow. That was when I made my second observation. The man on the throne was looking at me. Oh, sweet merciful! He was beautiful in a way that was almost rude, the kind of beautiful that made you want to apologize for having eyes. Long, dark hair pulled back from a face carved out of winter, sharp jaw, sharper cheekbones, a mouth that did not so much rest as wait, as though every smile he ever gave had to be earned at sword point. His robes were obsidian and silver, layered with the heavy chain of office that marked him as the regent prince in his father's long illness. A circlet of cold metal sat at the crown of his head, set with one single, slowly pulsing blue stone. The crown of resonance. Prince Jan Arif, the lonely heir, the boy who grew up beside Duke Lionel and been repaid for that friendship with what everyone in this room believed was treason. He was staring at me with absolutely nothing in his expression, nothing at all. Not anger, not pity, not even the bored contempt of a man being forced to sit through paperwork. Just nothing. A door that had been closed and bricked over a long, long time ago. Holy! He's even more handsome in person than the book said. The illustrator should be sued. I caught the thought as it slipped out of me and physically flinched, because somewhere in the warm chaos of my real brain, the brain currently occupying the wrong body in the wrong century, I knew I had no business thinking that right now. I was about to be sentenced to death, by beheading if the prologue was accurate, by burning if Lord Marcellus had his way. And the first coherent thought I'd produced in this entire crisis was the illustrator should be sued. Focus, Lionel. Focus. Lord Marcellus turned with a theatrical sweep of his cloak. "Your Highness," he said, his voice rich and oily and clearly enjoying the acoustics of the chamber. "The evidence is incontrovertible. Letters in his own hand, witnesses to his correspondence with the Southern rebels, coin discovered in his manor bearing the rebel seal. The traitor stands before you. All that remains is your judgment." I waited for the prince to speak. The prince did not speak. He looked at me, only at me, as though the entire court had emptied out and the two of us were the only people in this echoing marble cathedral. The silence stretched until it began to creak. "Say something, Lionel. Say something. Defend yourself. You read the book. You know you didn't do it. The body you're in didn't do it. Marcellus framed him. Marcellus is the one Marcellus is going to use to assassinate the prince in 3 days." My mouth opened. Nothing came out. The Duke's body, my body now, held itself rigid, trained for it. A lifetime of northern protocol coiled in these shoulders like wire, and every reflex this body had was screaming at me to stay silent, stay still, do not give them the satisfaction of begging. The original Lionel had died with his mouth shut. I could feel the muscle memory of it, the pride, the crushing, suffocating northern pride that had killed him. No. No, I am not dying in Chapter 12. I drew a breath, and the royal artifact, the crown of residence, sitting calm and cold on Prince Jan's brow, flared. It happened in less than a heartbeat. One moment the blue stone was a slow, steady pulse, and the next it was a violent, electric snap, a sound like glass under a boot, and the chamber went bright. Marcellus shouted. Someone, a guard, an attendant, lunged toward the dais. The prince was rising from the throne. The crown was sliding from his head, knocked loose by the explosion of light, falling toward the marble steps where it would shatter and cost the kingdom its only window into the truth of any sworn nobleman's heart. I do not remember deciding to move. The chains on my wrists were attached to nothing, a clerical oversight, a mistake the guards would be flogged for later. I lunged forward, the heavy black robes of the Duke billowing around me like a thundercloud, and I caught the crown 6 inches above the floor. I caught the prince at the same time. He had stumbled, off balance from the lurch of the artifact. His hand closed around my forearm, mine closed around the crown. Our knees hit the marble at the same instant, and for one perfectly still second, I was close enough to him to count the silver threading in the collar of his robe, close enough to smell cold steel and bergamot and something deeper, like a forest right before snowfall, and close enough that when the stone in the crown pulsed one last time, slow, deliberate, deep, I felt it in my teeth. "Oh," I thought, dazed. "Oh, his eyes are not black. They are really, really dark blue, like the bottom of a lake. I take back what I said about the illustrator. The illustrator did their best." The prince made a sound. It was very small, almost not a sound at all, a kind of a breath that did not become a word. His pupils blew wide. His grip on my forearm did not loosen. He was staring at me with an expression that was no longer nothing. It was, in fact, the furthest thing from nothing I had ever seen on a human face. "Your Highness?" Marcellus was at the foot of the dais, breathless, scandalized. "Your Highness, are you—" The prince held up one hand, not toward Marcellus, toward the entire court. A single sharp gesture of silence. The chamber obeyed instantly. Even the air seemed to stop moving. He looked down at me. I looked up at him. His hand was still around my arm. The crown was still in mine. Why is he looking at me like that? Why is he looking at me like he's never seen me before in his life? Oh, God, can he? No, he can't. That's ridiculous. The crown of resonance only works for the bearer. That's how it works in the book. It doesn't. His grip tightened, just slightly on my arm. Oh, oh no. He did not have me executed. He did not even continue the trial. What Prince Jan Aerith did in front of an entire court of stunned nobility and one apoplectic Lord Marcellus was rise to his full height, set the crown of resonance carefully back upon his own brow as though it had not just attempted to leap off his head, and announced in a voice that was perfectly level and perfectly cold that the trial would be postponed pending further investigation. "The Duke," he said, looking somewhere to the left of my face, "will be confined to the East Wing under my personal supervision. He will be available for questioning at my discretion. The court is dismissed." Marcellus made a sound like a man who had swallowed a beetle. "Your Highness, with respect, the evidence—" "Dismissed, Lord Marcellus." It was the way he said the name, soft, almost pleasant, the way a man might pet a dog he was planning to drown. Marcellus bowed. The court emptied. 2 guards lifted me, gently, which was disconcerting, to my feet, and the chains around my wrists fell away as though they had never been locked at all. The prince did not look at me as I was led from the throne room, but I felt him listening. The East Wing was a polite word for gilded cage. The chambers I was given were beautiful, 3 rooms in a row, vaulted ceilings, tall windows that looked out over a snow-dusted garden of bare cherry trees. A wash basin had been filled with steaming water. A change of clothes, somber, charcoal gray, embroidered along the cuffs with the Frostmore sigil, had been laid out on the bed. A platter of food sat on a low table beside the fire, untouched, as though someone had not been sure whether the Duke of the North was the kind of prisoner one fed or starved. I sat on the edge of the bed. The guards left. The door closed. I put my face in my hands. Okay, Lionel. Me, original me, real me, the one in here. Let's take stock. 1, I am in a book. 2, I am in the villain. 3, the villain is supposed to be executed in 3 days, after which the prince is assassinated by a man who is currently the second most powerful person in this castle. 4, I am almost certain that the crown of resonance has accidentally bonded me to the prince, and he can hear my thoughts. 5, I lifted my head and stared into the fire. 5, I just spent the entire trial mentally describing how attractive he is. A small strangled noise escaped my throat. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper. If he can really hear me, I thought carefully, slowly, if this is really happening, then I need to think about something else. I need to think about the case. I need to think about Marcellus. I need to think about anything other than how... The prince's face surfaced unbidden behind my closed eyes, the dark blue of his eyes, the small, soundless when his hand had closed around my arm. How he had stood when he turned away from me at the dais. Oh, for the love of... I threw myself face down on the bed. The body I was wearing was not used to being thrown face down on anything. The bed frame creaked. His long limbs did not know where to go. I lay there, gloved fingers fisted in the embroidered coverlet, and I gave myself 1 full minute of pure, unfiltered internal screaming, the kind of screaming I had specialized in back in my real life when something embarrassing had happened on the train and I had gone home and replayed it in my head until 2 in the morning. When the minute was up, I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling, and I thought, very deliberately, in the clearest voice my idiot brain could produce, "Prince Jan, if you can hear me, blink." There was, of course, no way to know if he blinked. He was not in this room. He was probably somewhere on the other side of this enormous palace, having a much more dignified breakdown than I was. So I tried again. "If you can hear me, please understand that I am not the man you think I am. I did not write those letters. I did not take that coin. I think Lord Marcellus is going to try to kill you in 3 days. Please be careful. Also..." I stopped. No, do not. Do not finish that sentence. "Also, you are extremely tall." I rolled onto my stomach and screamed into the pillow. The first court session, what would have been day 1 of 3 in the original timeline, was reconvened the next morning. I had not slept. I had spent the night pacing. I had spent a night going through every fragment of the original Lionel's memories I could pry loose, looking for anything I could use. I had found a cold father, a colder estate, a childhood spent in the same lessons as the prince, calligraphy, swordsmanship, statecraft, sitting on opposite sides of the same long table and never, not once in 15 years, exchanging a word that was not protocol. The original Lionel had been in love with the prince. He had buried it so deeply that even his own diary, which I had located in the memory attic of this borrowed brain, only referred to him as Y. One letter, written and crossed out and written again. Oh, I had thought, sitting on the edge of the strange bed in the cold dawn light. Oh, you poor, stupid boy. I am so sorry. I am the one who got to wear your face. I dressed myself in the charcoal robes. I let the attendants pin my hair back the way the Duke had always worn it. I looked at myself in the polished silver mirror, and I saw a stranger, sharp-jawed, pale, eyes like ice over a black lake. Resting villain face, my real brain supplied. The original Lionel had been called that behind his back since he was 12, the face that had not learned how to smile. I can work with this, I thought. I just have to stay in character, cold, stiff, say as little as possible. The original Duke would never have defended himself, so I won't either. I'll let the prince and his investigators find the truth. I just have to survive until they do. And I have to stop thinking about how he looked yesterday. Starting now. Now is when I stop. They walked me back into the throne room. He was already on the dais. Oh, come on. His robes were different today. Deep blue, the color of the stone in his crown. The collar was high and lined in white fur. He had not slept either. I could see it. There was a faint shadow under each eye, and his jaw was set in a way that made the muscle there visible. He was magnificent. He was tired. He was angry. He was angry on someone's behalf, and I could not tell whose. He looked at me as I was led to my place at the foot of the dais. I kept my face perfectly still. I had been practicing. Hello, I thought, in the most neutral possible inner voice. I hope you slept well. You look very nice today. I will now think about absolutely nothing for the rest of this trial. The prince's mouth twitched. It twitched. It was the smallest possible movement of the smallest possible muscle, and if I had not been staring at his face like a man memorizing it for the rest of his life, I would not have seen it at all. But it twitched. One corner. A flicker. As though he had caught the edge of a smile and ground it back down before it could happen. Oh God, he can hear me. Oh God, he can hear me! The prince's gloved fingers closed, very slowly, on the arm of his throne. Lord Marcellus stepped forward and began to read out the day's charges. Forged letters, the first batch. 3 of them, sealed with the Duke's personal sigil, dated to the autumn campaign, addressed to a rebel commander in the south. The handwriting was a perfect imitation. Lord Marcellus held one up for the court to see. I looked at it. The body I was in flinched, a small involuntary thing, the original Lionel's outrage flaring at the sight of his own seal misused, and I forced my face back to stillness. That's not my handwriting, I thought, knowing he could hear, unable to stop the thought. Look at the curve of the L. The original Lionel made his L's with a downstroke first. Whoever wrote this used an upstroke. That's not how he wrote. He'd never make that mistake. The prince did not react. The prince looked at the letter as though it bored him. Also, my traitor mind continued, your crown is crooked. It was. The crown of residence was sitting half a finger to the left of center, where it had slipped during the night and not been corrected. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but it bothered me with the precise, idiotic intensity of a stranger seeing a piece of lettuce in someone's teeth on the train. It's so crooked. It's driving me crazy. It's such a perfect crown, and it's just sitting there wrong. I want to fix it. I want to walk up there and fix it. I want to... The prince lifted his hand. The prince, in the middle of Lord Marcellus's accusation, slowly and with absolutely no expression, adjusted the crown of residence back to center on his brow. Lord Marcellus stopped reading. The entire court did not stop staring at the prince's hand. The prince, without looking at me, without looking at anyone, said in his calm, even courtroom voice, "Continue, Lord Marcellus." "I'm going to die. I am going to die. I am literally going to die." He heard that. He heard that, and he fixed it. He fixed his crown because I told him to fix his crown. I am the dumbest person ever to be transmigrated into a fantasy novel. The prince's fingers closed very slowly on the arm of his throne again. Just slightly. Just enough. "Stop being charming," my brain wailed. "Stop! Stop it! I am being tried for treason." The corner of the prince's mouth twitched a second time. I should have closed my eyes then. I should have closed my eyes, taken a slow breath, recited the periodic table, anything to stop the cascade. But the prince looked tired, and the prince had not finished his soup, and the prince had been quiet for so long by himself on that throne. And somewhere between one careful breath and the next, I felt the thing arrive that I had been refusing to name for 3 days running. It walked into my chest like it had always lived there. It sat down. You already know what happened next. The wine, the cough, the goblet clattering down the marble steps of the dais, 23 nobles turning as one to stare at their regent prince. Lord Marcellus, mid-syllable in his denunciation of my many treasons, stopping with his mouth still open. It was the second twitch. The second twitch was no longer a twitch. The second twitch was a smile he had not quite managed to suppress in time, and which he had then covered with a gloved hand, and which had then required him to set down a goblet of wine he was clearly in no condition to swallow. I closed my eyes. He came for me that night, not himself, not in person. The summons arrived with 2 of his personal guard, both of them very tall, both of them very polite, both of them wearing the deep blue of the prince's house with the white fur collars, and they walked me through corridors I had only seen in fragments of the duke's memory. Down a marble gallery hung with portraits of long-dead queens, past a chapel where a single bell was ringing the evening prayer, up a narrow spiral stair I had never climbed before in this life or the original Lionel's, into a private antechamber where a fire was burning low, and a single oil lamp cast a yellow circle of light over a desk piled with documents. The prince was sitting behind the desk. He had taken off the crown. It sat to one side, blue stone dimmed, its work done for the evening. His hair was loose. He had unfastened the high collar of his robe, a small informality, a small undoing, the kind of detail that did not belong to a man who was about to interrogate a traitor. I stopped in the doorway. "Don't look, don't look, don't." I looked. "Duke Lionel," he said. His voice in this room was different from his voice in the throne room. Lower, closer, the kind of voice you used when there was no audience and no echo and no need to be heard at the back of the chamber. It crossed the small space between us in a way that made me forget I had been planning to be cold. I made my own voice as cold as I could. "Your Highness," he said. "Sit." I sat. The chair across from him was carved oak, deeply uncomfortable. He left me in it for a long, long moment, his eyes dark blue, lake-bottom blue, the kind of blue that the original Lionel had spent 15 years not writing about, fixed steadily on mine. I tried to hold his gaze. I tried to look like a villain. I tried to look like a man who had nothing to hide. I failed at all 3. He smells like the same cologne as yesterday. Cedarwood, cold. Something, what is that? Something like a library after rain. I want to put my face in his collar. I want... "Stop! Stop it, Lionel!" The prince closed his eyes for one slow second, as though he were marshalling something inside himself, and then he opened them and said, very softly, "You did not write those letters." I did not answer. I could not answer. The shock of the sentence, the direction of it, the fact that he had not asked me, he had stated it, knocked the breath out of me. I sat in the carved oak chair like a man who had just been pushed off a small cliff. He went on. The seal on the third letter is wrong. It uses the old Frostmore sigil, the one your grandfather replaced in the year of the eclipse. Anyone who actually corresponded with you would have known. Anyone who actually knew you, he paused very slightly on the word knew, would have known. I stared at him. He's been investigating. He's already been investigating. Since when? Since the trial yesterday? Since... How long? I said. And my voice came out as the Duke's voice, low and stiff and stripped of all the warmth I felt. He did not answer immediately. He picked up a small ivory letter opener from the desk and turned it between two fingers. The firelight caught the carved handle. You, he said very softly, you are in no position to demand answers from me, Duke Lionel. The body I was in went absolutely still. The original Lionel's pride, that suffocating northern pride, the same pride that had killed him in the original book, surged up under my skin like a tide. I felt my jaw tighten. I felt my hands fold themselves into the precise, formal fold the Duke's hands had been taught to make in the presence of royalty. I felt myself, despite myself, begin to lift my chin. And inside, where he could hear me, I thought, please don't be angry with me. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll be whoever you need me to be. Just please don't look at me like that. Please. The prince put the letter opener down. He did it slowly. He did it deliberately. He set it on the desk and folded his hands on top of it. And when he looked up at me again, the angry had gone out of his face. Not gone, banked, the way a fire gets banked, kept alive but covered. But no longer the thing in front. What was in front now was a kind of terrible, careful softness. Duke Lionel, he said, I am going to ask you a question, and I would like you to answer it honestly, out loud. Out loud. The word landed like a stone in a pond. He knew, I knew he could hear me. He knew, and he was telling me here, in this small firelit room, with his hair down and his collar open and his hands folded on his desk, that he knew. I could not breathe. The Duke's chest was too tight. The room was too warm. The shadows on the wall were dancing in time with the slow, terrible thudding of a heart that was not entirely mine. What, I said, do you want to know? His eyes did not leave my face. Who, he said, are you? I told him. I told him everything, sitting in the carved oak chair in the firelight with my borrowed hands folded in my lap. I told him about the apartment and the instant noodles and the novel I had read 4 times on my phone. I told him about waking up in chains, about the original Lionel's memories pressing in like wet paper, about the assassination that was scheduled to happen in 2 days unless we stopped it. I told him that Lord Marcellus was the one who had forged the letters, and that the second wave of evidence, coin with the rebel seal, a confession from a captured courier, would arrive tomorrow at dawn, and that all of it was a fabrication. I told him that I did not know how to be the Duke he had grown up with, that I was sorry, that the original Lionel had loved him and had been too proud and too frightened to ever say so, that the diary in the bottom of the locked chest in the Duke's chambers in the East Wing was full of the letter Y, written and crossed out and written again. I did not tell him what I had been thinking in the throne room. He did not ask. When I was done, the fire had burned down to a low red glow, and his hands were still folded on the desk in front of him, and his face was, for the first time since I had laid eyes on him, open. Open the way a book is open. Open the way a door is open. Not warm, not yet, not soft, but no longer closed. I see, he said. That was all. We sat in silence for a long time. I watched the fire, he watched me. Eventually, and I think this is the part of the night I will remember for the rest of my life, however long that is in this body, he stood up, walked around the desk, and stopped beside my chair. He held out his hand. I looked at it. Long fingers, calloused at the base of the thumb from a swordsman's grip, the nails neat and short. A gold ring on the smallest finger set with a single chip of the same blue stone that was in the crown of resonance. Oh, my real brain thought, distantly, far away. Oh, the ring is keyed to the crown. That's how the bond is maintained. That's why he can. Come, he said. We have work to do, Duke Lionel. I put my hand in his. He pulled me up. He was, as I had previously noted at greater length than was appropriate for a man on trial for his life, very tall. Standing this close to him, I had to tilt my chin up to meet his eyes, and the firelight caught in his dark hair and threw long shadows across the high planes of his face. And he smelled like cedar wood and cold steel and a library after rain. And his hand was warm. Warmer than the original Lionel had ever, in 15 years, had allowed himself to imagine. He did not let go of my hand. Oh, I thought, helplessly, all my walls down, all my care for him spilling out into the bonded silence between us. Oh, please. The prince closed his eyes. He did not let go. Tomorrow, he said, quietly to the fire, Lord Marcellus will bring forward the coin and the courier. You will say nothing. You will stand where you stood today, and you will look exactly as cold as you looked today, and you will let him bury himself. Yes, Your Highness. Jan. I blinked. I'm sorry? His eyes opened. The blue of them this close was not the bottom of a lake. It was the top of a lake. Light moving through it, depth held in reserve, something alive under the surface. In this room, he said, my name is Jan. Oh. Oh, no. Oh, I'm going to die. Forget the executioner, forget Marcellus, forget the assassination. This is what's going to kill me. Jan, I said, out loud, in the Duke's stiff, cold voice, with the Duke's stiff, cold face, while my insides liquefied. The corner of his mouth twitched. For the third time, I was counting now. He let go of my hand. We spent the next 2 days building a trap. Jan, the name sat in my mouth like a sweet I was not allowed to chew, moved through the palace like a man who had been waiting his entire life to be allowed to do something useful. He summoned his investigators. He sent riders to the Frostmoor to confirm the original handwriting samples. He had the chest in my chambers brought up, including the diary, and he did not, to his enormous credit, open it. He set it on a low shelf in his private antechamber, and he did not look at it once. I think that was the moment I knew he had already decided about me. Not about the trial, not about the treason, about me, or about the original Lionel, the one whose face I was wearing, the one who had loved him in single-letter increments for 15 years. I think Jan had read the situation faster than I had and had decided that the boy who had grown up across the long table from him had never been his enemy, and he was not going to make him prove it. He did not say any of this. He did not need to. I had not realized until I was wearing the Duke's body what it was like to be known without being spoken to exist beside someone who could hear the inside of your head and was choosing, minute by minute, decision by decision, not to use any of it against you. Day 2 of the trial went exactly as he had said it would. Lord Marcellus brought forward the coin. He brought forward the courier, a thin, terrified man who recited his rehearsed confession with all the conviction of a child reading from a script. The court murmured. The nobles looked at me with the wet grandmother's look from the first day, only more so. I stood where I had stood. I looked exactly as cold as I had looked. I let Marcellus bury himself. Inside, I narrated the entire thing for Jan's benefit. The courier's hands are shaking. He keeps glancing at Marcellus before each sentence. Look at the gold chain at his neck. That's not a courier's chain. That's noble work. Someone paid him in jewelry he can't sell. Look at Marcellus's left hand. He's tapping a rhythm. He's nervous. He's never been this close to actually getting a man killed before, has he? He's nervous. Also, Jan, don't look at me like that. I know you can hear me. Stop it. Your court face is slipping. Your court face? Jan. Jan, your jaw is doing the thing. The prince's jaw was, in fact, doing the thing. The small visible tightening of muscle that meant he was holding something in. He held it in. He held it in for the entire session. He let Marcellus stand at the foot of the dais, gesturing with the coin, declaiming about the safety of the realm, and only at the very end, when Marcellus turned with his theatrical sweep of the cloak and demanded, for the second time in 3 days, my immediate execution, did Jan finally lift his hand. "Lord Marcellus," he said in his calm, even courtroom voice, "tell me, when did the Frostmore sigil change?" The chamber went still. Lord Marcellus, midway through his theatrical sweep, blinked. Your Highness? The Frostmore sigil, the seal on the third of your letters, when was it last in use? I would not... Your Highness, I am no expert in northern heraldry. You forged a letter with a sigil that has not been in use for 43 years. You forged it well. You used the correct shape, the correct ink, the correct weight of wax. You only made one mistake. You used a reference book printed before the year of the eclipse. The chamber, which had been still, became a kind of breathless thing, a pond holding its breath. Marcellus's mouth opened. It closed. The courier, Jan continued in the same pleasant tone, was paid in a chain of office bearing your house's secondary seal. He admitted as much in interrogation last night. The coin in the Duke's manor was placed by your steward, who is at this moment in the custody of my personal guard. The handwriting on the letters is not the Duke's. 3 independent calligraphers confirmed it this morning. He paused. "Would you," he said, "like to revise your accusation, Lord Marcellus?" Marcellus, to his credit, did not faint. He did try to run. The guards stopped him before he reached the doors. It was over very quickly after that. Marcellus's holdings were stripped. His house was placed under royal seal. The would-be assassin he had positioned in the inner palace was found and quietly dealt with before the sun was up the next morning. The court, the same court that had been calling for my head 2 days ago, bowed to me as I walked through the corridors and called me your grace and pretended very hard that they had never thought anything else. I went back to the east wing. I sat on the edge of the bed I had not slept in. The diary was back in its locked chest. The fire was lit. The platter of food was untouched again, because the kitchen kept sending it up and I kept forgetting to eat. The body I was in was very tired. The mind I was in was very loud. There was a knock at the door. It was not a guard's knock. It was not a servant's knock. It was a single considered knuckle against the wood, the knock of someone who knew they were welcome and was being polite anyway. "Come in," I said. Jan came in. He had changed out of his court robes. He was wearing something simpler, a long dark coat over a plain linen shirt, his hair loose again, the crown of resonance nowhere to be seen. He had taken it off. He had taken it off, and he had walked across the palace to a room where I was alone, with no crown on his head, and he had knocked on my door like he was not the regent of a kingdom, and I was not the man whose execution he had been presiding over 48 hours ago. He closed the door behind him. He stood there. I stood up. We looked at each other. "Say something," my real brain whispered. "Say something, anything. Tell him... I did not say anything. He crossed the room. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my chin up again, the way I had in the firelit antechamber. The lake of his eyes was very deep tonight. He smelled like cedarwood. He had come to me with the high collar of his robe unfastened, informal, the way a man dresses for someone he has stopped trying to impress, and that one detail, that one small, chosen informality, did more damage to me than any of the more dignified things he had done all week. When I looked back up, the corner of his mouth had twitched again. For the 4th time, I was still counting. "Lionel," he said. "Jan," I said. He lifted his hand. He did not touch me. He held it, palm up in the space between us, the same way he more. I did not move closer. I did not say any of the things my real brain was howling at me to say. I love you. I have loved you since chapter 3. I read your book 4 times on a phone in a different world. Please, please, please. He heard all of it, of course. He squeezed my hand, once, gently. I know, he said. I hear you, Lionel. We have time. Time. I held on to the word like a small lit candle. The fire crackled, the snow fell. Somewhere down the long marble corridor, a bell was ringing the evening prayer. Jan, Prince Jan Arith, the regent of the Crown of Resonance, the lonely heir, the boy who had grown up across a long table from a duke he had never been allowed to know, stood in the east wing chamber of a man who was not quite that duke, and held his hand and did not promise him anything. It was not a kiss, it was not a confession, it was not the warm cinematic resolution of a novel read 4 times on a phone in another world. It was a beginning, a conditional one. A door opened only as far as it could be safely opened tonight, with the understanding that both of us would have to keep walking, through the rest of winter, through the slow thaw of a court that had nearly killed me, through every small dinner and every difficult conversation, and every morning that he and I both woke up in this strange new bonded silence, before either of us would know what was on the other side. Jan, I thought, as he finally let go of my hand and stepped back toward the door. He paused, he looked over his shoulder at me, his dark hair fell across his eyes. Good night. He smiled. It was the smallest possible smile, the smallest possible movement of the smallest possible muscle, but it was unmistakably a smile, and it was the first one I had seen on his face in 3 days, and he was, for one perfect, unhurried second, letting me have it. Good night, Lionel, he said out loud. He closed the door. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I put my face in my hands, and in the warm, ridiculous fanboy chaos of my real brain, in the bonded silence of a kingdom whose crown could still hear every word, I thought, very quietly, very honestly, very much for myself. Oh, we're going to be okay. We're going to be slowly, carefully, conditionally okay. The fire grew low, the snow fell. Somewhere, far down the corridor, a door clicked softly shut. I smiled into my gloved hands. It was not a villain's smile. It was the first real one this borrowed face had worn in a very long time.
The end.